Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Human Up podcast. This is episode 9, and I've simply entitled it No Mo FOMO for easy remembering. Not unlike a few episodes back, Stop, Drop, and Roll, I like to find little mantras, if you will, modern day mantras, reminders to help us stay in the zone, get in the zone when we fall out of the zone. And what is the zone? The zone is, there's a lot of ways to refer to the zone. The way I mean it is basically a sustained and chosen version of the zone that most people are used to experiencing, which is more you happen upon the zone by accident. Okay, this is not a by accident zone moment where you don't know why it happened. You just suddenly feel that feeling of bliss and clarity. That's the zone. But I'm talking about a higher level of the zone, which is not happenstance or accidental, but chosen. And that's what Human Up is all about. Human Up is the human upgrade to a state of consciousness, and I regret using the word state because, again, it's not static, but it is the ever woke practice, an ever deepening practice of being woke, staying woke, presence. In the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred Hindu text, Krishna refers to it as inextinguishable bliss. So a bliss that cannot be interrupted or broken. So in other words, it's a badass bliss is another one of my little code phrases. It's not just fruity tooty, airy fairy bliss. Oh, I'm so blissed out. No, it is badass bliss. Badass bliss means you have worked your ass off for it in a sense. You know, you don't just come to that state. So it's easy to, create a sense of bliss, and that's what everybody really wants. They want to create a sense of bliss, but then they do it with some kind of, usually with some kind of external means, whether it's food or it's a drug or it's setting up the circumstances just right to have a certain, moment of bliss. We spend our entire lives sometimes trying to repeat moments that were zone moments at the time. You were with that lover of yours, and you were driving, and the sun was setting, and the music was playing, and it was so good, and you just felt so happy, and you want to just have that moment again and again and again, and so you try to put the pieces together to get your zone moment on again. Your moment of bliss, and wouldn't you know it, it doesn't seem to be the same as the first time. Because what was different about the first zone moment versus the one you're trying to repeat? You weren't trying to do it. It's just that magical, oh my gosh, here we are. It's happening. I'm just giving you a pretty simple example of a zone bliss moment. But I'm talking about a higher bliss. One more example before I get into that deeper is, when we talk about what everybody wants is bliss, essentially. How we go about it is usually misinformed. And so a great example I think of, the way kids, and certainly I did, we seek it in a simple quick fix, like, taking ecstasy or something like that. You do, and I hope you don't do that. But I'm just giving you an example that's a very, you do that. Why do they call it ecstasy? Because it gives you a feeling of bliss, a feeling of, everything's okay, and I feel so good, and on and on and on. But it's not the real deal, and it comes with a huge price tag. So don't bother. It's not worth it. But I'm just giving that example because, so many of us are seeking that, and we want some way to make it happen with something. As I'm going to take a pill, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. I'm going to find this person, or this situation, or whatever it is. And the more you try to get it, in a way, it's almost like the more it pushes it away. But deep down, what we're all really looking for is a sense of wholeness, a sense of peace, a sense of being right wherever we need to be, a sense of completeness in that sense, a sense of wholeness, completeness, well-being, all of these phrases, happiness, right? And in our culture, as I explained a couple episodes back, we just, and when I say our culture, I mean the whole planet and all of its variations have different variations of trying to remedy that feeling of incompleteness, which I have shown again and again and will continue to show again and again is the result of our deep thinking, not just our obvious thinking of what we know, the content of what we're thinking, but the thinking itself. Even deeper than negative versus positive. There's a lot of talk about think positive, not negative, but those are both in the same boat. I'm wanting to help you start to see deeper than that and to see how we are almost governed by a kind of code, if you will, of thinking that we all absorbed without realizing we were absorbing it. Whatever language you speak, whatever, ideological background you've been exposed to or have learned over the course of your life, there's something behind it that's universal across the globe and all peoples. And that's a really important and empowering thing to realize. So that's what it's that code, it's that way of thinking that I seek to help you begin to see. Because as you begin to see it, then you start getting into a deeper level of seeing, thinking, being, presence, zone. So in other words, the zone is a practice of staying in that. Think of it like if we're all using a lens all the time to perceive our reality. When we get a break from the restrictive conditioning, inhibitioning, I know I'm working the words a little bit here, so just I hope you can enjoy my neologisms. But if we're used to that restrictive space, what happens when we take a pill or have some zone moment? One way to describe it is that constrictive, restrictive feeling. This is why people drink. Great example. When it drops those inhibitions, that's like the rigidity of the lens that we're used to, and then therefore the way that we feel. And we may get used to it, but we may not realize we feel so, constricted. And so when we are drawn to these things, it's because we want to just throw off the constriction and the feeling of repression and holding back and tenseness and all that. We all love to just have a break from that, and so in a way that's what we're all seeking. We wait till Friday night sometimes to go and get wasted, get party, with friends or whatever, or go and try to seek some kind of fulfillment at the bar or the club or whatever it is that you do to just kind of look for fun, right? And you don't want to miss out. We're starting to get to the guiding title and theme of this podcast, which is all about FOMO, right? You don't want to miss out. You want to get into the action, right? You want to, because that gives you a feeling of belonging, which is a kind of feeling of bliss. And there's a feeling like if you don't keep up with it, you're not going to get that. So what's happening at the deepest level, as I've pointed out again and again, is what we really want is not what we've decided that we want, what we're after. And this is where it can be, I could shake you to the core. If you really hear me, you're going to have to put into question everything that you actually think you wanted this whole time, because what I'm suggesting is two things. First thing, what you think you want is not what you're really after, and even if you get what you want, it won't scratch that itch for very long. It won't quench the thirst for very long, or even at all, in the sense of once you've attained all that you thought you wanted to attain, you're going to realize you need more. Why? Because you didn't actually get to the real cause to begin with, right? So we live our entire lives under the slave driving kind of impetus behind us that's saying, if you don't hurry up, you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out. So there's a deep FOMO drive. Okay, so if you don't know what FOMO, that acronym is fear of missing out. Okay. And no mo FOMO is my catchy little phrase for enough of that, because it's torture. It's in no uncertain terms, it's a form of hell in this sense. It's robbing you from your bliss all the time. So entire lives can be driven by a sense of FOMO. And it's a lot of the whole drive behind going faster, 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 more, 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 more. And we're seeing it, turn on the TV and watch the commercials and the whole thing. This is going to be another one of my episodes is on narcissism and just the universal narcissism that you see everywhere. It's condoned, especially in marketing and, turn on the television, man. In between every abundant numbers of prescription commercials, prescription medication, which are going to make you feel so much better because it takes care of the symptom, but you might get some seriously awful side effects. In between those commercials, and they are abundant, are all these commercials that are about catering to the FOMO in all of us and the need, and also the narcissistic need to make reality revolve around you. So it's a really interesting thing. I'm going to get into that a lot more in the next sharing. But right now, focusing on the FOMO and how deadly FOMO is. Think of it as a program. Okay, it's like in a way, it's constantly being in fight or flight, in the sense that, and all of yoga shows that the root of suffering really is attachment, and it's worded in different ways. If we take Krishna's wording, it's the attachment to the fruits of your actions, the outcome of your actions, right? And as soon as you're attached to one outcome, you're simultaneously attached to your fear of not having that outcome, and there is a gripping, constricting, and insidious effect to that, even to the level of your health. I mean, we know that stress is absolutely detrimental to the body, especially over time, relentless stress. Well, that's what I'm suggesting is normal stress, which it's still optional. We don't have to do it. But because there is such a universal, and this is what I call the Titanic. Imagine that everybody is on the Titanic. Okay? Everybody. And there's all different floors, and there's all different sections and different class levels. And, there's the spiritual section over here, and the religious section, and the atheist section, and whatever section you're in, and whatever is your, whatever way you're trying to work the Titanic scene in your favor, the whole thing is going down. Okay? This is huge. The FOMO is really the overall feeling of the spirit of the Titanic, which is, you don't want to be on that lowest floor. You want to get up to the ballroom and be, rocking it and rubbing shoulders with the elite and all of that. And of course, some people have the capacity, ambition to get all the way there, and they're the success stories. And then there's the ones that just can't seem to hack it and are, shoveling coal in the basement or whatever. The basement. Does a boat have a basement? But you get what I'm saying. So it's a great analogy for the entirety of the human culture. Okay, you've got all different races, all different countries, religions, ideologies, mindsets, but they're all sharing a common code. This is huge, and this is not being said because what we're doing is we're so used to seeing with that lens, that constrictive lens. We can't zoom out to that more expanded lens where we can begin to really see the entirety of what's going on and really connect the dots. The expanded lens, bird's eye view, I don't like a lot of the sayings, but for all intents and purposes, you're zooming out in your awareness enough to now connect the dots. Oh my gosh, I was seeing this whole problem of racism as its own thing, its own makeup, its own problem, boom, in that compartment. Then over here, I was seeing sexism, for example, is its own thing, its own problem. It's boom, oh my gosh, and you start to look and then the environment and what's going on, the destruction of the environment and global warming and climate change. Oh my gosh, that's its own thing, boom. And then I look over here and the nuclear weapons threat that we're facing. Oh my gosh, and then I look over here and it's economy, blah 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 blah, on and on and on. And we can, in that lens that we're all using, we can see the symptoms. We're really good at seeing the symptoms, but we don't know how to zoom out yet. And this is what I want you to learn with me as you join me on this this ever unfolding journey of getting into sustainable zone consciousness, is contingent upon deepening your rational capacities. We're all using reason all the time, but the reason itself may be uprooted from the source of reason. So we're using, in a way, kind of little myopic mind bite versions of reason. And that's not what real reason is reason itself. It's like everybody can make sense. 2 + 2 = 4, that makes sense. Or I am hungry, that makes sense. Or I don't like him very much, makes sense, right? So we can make sense in little fragments, but we're desensitized in the sense that we don't we don't know how to be and to operate and see and think and understand from that vantage point of sense itself. And that's what I'm saying is the zone. So the zone is almost a capacity to stay surfing with sense in all the myriad, vast array of differences and different situations and unique peoples and relations and issues and all this stuff. If we're in a myopic space, which is what's generating all those problems, mind you, we can't see that they're all being generated from the same way of thinking and seeing and operating. So that's really what this is a zoom out. So when I say no-mo FOMO, what I'm doing is, you can be, think of these fingers back behind my ears here. I can't see them. And this represents that lens and all of that restrictive lens that we really want to break from it, because it's generating all of our stress. It's a program that's hiding in the background. It generates all that we see. Everything, when we're experiencing reality, we don't realize that there's an interpretation process going on. We're just encountering experiences in reality, and we don't realize it's going through an interpreter. And so if that interpreting lens is distorting reality, but you don't know that it's distorting, you're just taking everything that you see at face value, then you are essentially a slave to your own misinterpretations and misinterpreting itself. And what I'm saying is that we cannot get to solutions to problems, for example, if we don't even realize that we've got a lens here that's generating all these problems. It's the lens essentially of ideology, of any kind of ideology. And when you are identified with that, and you don't know how to step back from that, then someone's different lens or different variation on that is going to be a threat to yours. And that becomes the beginning of the collisions and catastrophes, really, of humanity through time. That have escalated to entire ethnic cleansings and genocides and holocausts and all the really awful stuff, the really obviously awful stuff, war, destruction of the environment, rape, abuse, murder, blah, 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 blah. But it's all the way down to the little things too, that little moment where you don't listen. You can't listen to your sweet child who's doesn't know how to express herself yet in what she's feeling. And you just go, stop it, you're being a bad kid. And just shut down this child's feelings for their inability to express what's going on, because they're in this scary world where if they mess up even just a little bit, love is taken away. Bye-bye, love. Mommy doesn't love you anymore. Bye-bye, daddy doesn't love you anymore. We don't realize how many moments like that, which are just whatever, kids. And when kids cry or feel hurt, they're like, oh, well, they're kids, their emotions they're small kid emotions. If you can dare to zoom out of your lens and feel what that child is feeling, you would cry for a week to know what we just desensitized to. So in other words, we teach our kids this is how we transmit from generation to generation through our malpractice and our insensitivity, our learned insensitivity. Instead of resensitizing to our kids, we desensitize our kids. And so it's this whole thing. And in that desensitization, that is really, it's a form of abuse. It's normalized abuse. It's nobody would call it that. We think, child abuse is when somebody beats their child or is, mentally, emotionally abusive to them in some obvious way. But there's a normalized abuse of these sweet, precious beings who are really coming from a more natural place than we are, because we've been so accustomed to our desensitized state, we don't even realize what we've lost touch with. But the kids, well, they are the embodiment of that not desensitized intelligence, nature. They're really nature. And then you can connect the dot there. The way we're treating our infants, babies, kids is connected to, say, how the patriarchy, the unhealthy masculine has treated women, and how we destroy nature. And you can start to connect the dots and go, oh my gosh, so there's something universal going on here. And so if you can think of it in just of the visual, again, like we come into the world sort of just open, and we don't have that hard sense of separation between me, you, mom, dad, brother, sister. We learn that with every day, every moment. It just kind of gets drilled in. So imagine as you're growing 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9, 10, boom. And then you learn, you get sharp. You get savvy in the way that you got to be, in the way you got to think, in the way you got to operate, and think about how many times you feel embarrassed by who you are and how you are naturally, and how many times you get a frown or I call it the still face because of a brilliant video that I highly recommend you watch. It's called the Still Face Experiment, I believe. And if you type that in, I'm sure you'll find it. But it shows the effect of a mother. They're running these tests on purpose, of course. The effects of a mom with her child when she's fully engaged and responding, and there's a dialogue going on energetically, even if not verbally. There's a sense, and you see how blissed out the baby is in that interaction, because that is, nature needs that reciprocal love flow of validation, relationship. That's the fabric of nature. That's what humans have bastardized themselves from without even knowing why or how. We just find ourselves in all of the awful effects of it, the symptoms, right? But we don't know how to see the cause. Well, this video shows a mom just like that, and then she turns, comes back, deadpan face, no response, completely non-responsive. And you watch this child, it always is chilling for me to watch. You watch this child in about 30 seconds to a minute just melt down entirely, trying to get her attention, trying to get some response, trying to feel some, validation, reciprocation, and, of this deep need. It's built in. The baby isn't thinking about that in the sense that we think. The baby's just needs it, right? And you see how quickly this baby melts down. It's heartbreaking to watch. It's painful. Especially if you can realize that that's exactly what happened to all of us. Even if our moms or dads didn't do that exact thing, the culture is a still face culture. And it still faces nature. It still faces authenticity. It still faces whatever behaviors don't fit into the rigid, one of the most sly programs of all is the program of cool, right? That word cool, I believe it's still cool. I'm starting to get up there in age now. Forgive me, kids. But I still think, my son's 12. I still think cool is cool. But here's the point. Whether it's cool or it's another word now, cool is the unspoken sort of way that you're supposed to be. It's like a scale, right? As soon as we have this standard of cool, it's like, of course you want to be cool and you don't want to be uncool, right? And I've noticed over the generations, one of the symptoms of this is I noticed when I listened to 70s music, 60s, 70s, 80s, there was like a range that I really, really loved. I still do. But when I was really in high school and like really into that music, man, I loved some of these songs. And I noticed, man, nobody would write songs like this now. One that comes to my mind, and I was like 15 years old rocking out to this song. And I know I was a bit of a freak, but Paul McCartney's Silly Love Songs. I'd be driving in my Toyota MR2, cranking this thing. It's like, you'd think that people would have heard enough of silly love songs. And, I somehow knew that according to the standards of cool, that it was as cheesy gets. And I'm grateful for the fact that I could say at least enough that I didn't care If people thought it was cheesy, I loved it. And there's a lot of songs like that that I really loved. George Harrison, to pick another post-Beatle moment. All I got to do is to love you. All I got to be is be happy. I could keep singing. This isn't a song concert right now. It's a different kind of concert. My point being is there was like a sweetness and an innocence and like, something joyful about it, something pure about it, something non-self-conscious about it in the way that already in the 90s, which is when I was a teen, into the 2000s, I noticed, again, it was unspoken, but it just kind of, you get the code of your culture through osmosis. It doesn't have to be literal moments where it's like explicitly told to you that this is cool and this is uncool. You just kind of start to know, I remember when I started to get self-conscious about my laugh, and I thought my laugh made me sound, uncool, giddy. And then that's not cool. That's not manly. That's whatever man programs I had running from my culture. And I started to suppress that laugh, which was what? My joy. That was my joy. But I knew it wasn't cool in the eyes, the restrictive, still face eyes of the culture around me. And I started to realize, and what's the thinking? If I don't shut this down, I'm going to not be cool or seen as cool or manly or attractive or whatever, and then I won't get that girl, and because that girl likes this kind of guy and I need to be that kind of guy, so in order to FOMO. And the FOMO, what I'm trying to show is that the FOMO is not a small thing. Because if you really add up all of those moments, conscious or unconscious, where we learn how to restrict, you may be having the sense of belonging and fitting in, which is in a way like a weird, distorted kind of pleasure, because you're like, okay, I fit in, I'm cool, I'm like everyone else, or others want to be like me, or whatever is going on in your head. And you don't realize what just happened is really sad, which is that you're so not actually confident in yourself and who you are. You bought into the Titanic FOMO code, and you coerced your being into something palatable, status quo. So even if you're at the top, you're rolling with the elite in the ballroom. Yeah, you've coerced a sense of superiority, uniqueness, to the extent that not everybody, you're in the 1%, let's say, if we're to make that the goal on the Titanic, is to be the 1%. That's where you're a celebrity. That's where everybody loves you. That's where you're successful. That's where you have a lot of money. That's where you can do whatever you want, right? Who wouldn't want that? But meanwhile, what you're doing is you have almost consecrated and fixed yourself even deeper in what way in the background is actually killing you. You don't even realize it. And a lot of the wisdom teachings, brought that out. If I was to quote a Bible quote, and I'm not a religious guy, but I really feel that there was a lot of wisdom that came through all of the sacred texts, whether it was the Bible or the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita, just to name a few of them. They were wisdom transmissions that then got dogmatized in their religious deliveries in many cases. So I like to read them from that expanded view and kind of decode them. What did Jesus mean, for example, when he said, it's harder for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle? I think it was something like that. So if you can strip away the old world biblical sounding language, and let's just use the word bliss is heaven. Bliss, sustained bliss, is sustained zone badassery that I'm really wanting us to all come to, right? That's the human up path. But the rich person, what's the rich person? Well, it doesn't mean that money is evil. And that's where people take this the wrong way. It's like, if you're rich, then you're bad, you're evil. No. It's not that. It's that, let's take the word rich as the meaning of succeeding on the Titanic. And if you succeed on your death boat, if you exceed on the death boat and you're too myopic, which means too narrow visioned, too narrow lensed to be able to see that this whole thing's going down, because you've surrounded yourself and a bunch of people sharing the same status quo standard of success that you can be like, wow, yeah, I made it, right? Or if you aren't making it, I'm not making it, I'm depressed. Nobody loves me. Everybody's on that same scale. Everyone's playing that same game no matter where you are in the status quo scale, right? But what I'm saying is to zoom out and see that if that's just status quo in terms of what the human being and what life and what being itself is meant to be, and how we're constantly cutting ourselves off from it, how it happened very slowly from childhood when we were just open, beautiful, naturally loving beings, and how we got distorted over time. So it was gradual until we all get initiated, for lack of a better word. That makes it sound too positive, but it's like we're getting initiated into a cult is what it's like. But in this cult, it's not one specific leader or religion. It's all of the cultures. Look at the word culture, culture. And so what I'm saying is huge, that every single variant of culture generated at a deeper level with this lens is code that fragments and divides and constricts and shuts us down and gets us desensitized. That happens globally, guys. Like, it happens everywhere in different ways in different cultures. So everybody's got to get cool, which means adjust to who's making these rules. Well, that's where we're all kind of co-creating the Titanic ambiance that we're in right now. If you zoom out, you see that that's a whole FOMO driven. That's the fuel of the Titanic, if you will. What do people say? I don't want to miss the boat. FOMO, right? I don't want to miss out. On what? It's nothing more than an idea that if you don't miss the action, and think about how much marketing leverages FOMO. Oh man, if you start to look at that, and the biggest one for me that really gets my blood boiling is when wisdom coaches and teachers and people that are in the spiritual arts and healing arts are using FOMO tactics to coerce their followers in. And you guys know who you are. That is a gross contradiction to what the whole heart and spirit of what wisdom is calling us off of the Titanic. Out of the, if even normalized, insidious, stressful, joy-killing effects of FOMO. And that's what I'm speaking to. Now, heaven, the meek shall inherit the earth. So again, we always think of it as a measure of money. The rich can't make it into heaven. What's heaven? It's bliss. Bliss is, so they've gotten so successful in the anti-bliss space that they've gotten a sense that they're successful. And like I said, it's a kind of pleasure. But it's more like a drug. It's more like something you need. I often think about people who make it big and they're famous and they're the biggest deal and they're on every magazine cover, musician, actor, whatever. And then a few years goes by and then whatever happened to so-and-so? Oh, well, that's old news. The new person in town is da-da-da-da-da. And da-da-da-da-da-da. If you haven't heard of her, she's a great actor. And, I think about what that person who was experiencing that temporarily coerced sense of pleasure of being important. It wasn't real importance, because real importance is not contingent upon the adulation, adoration, admiration of those still facers around you. So if you're in a still face culture and then you somehow reach the standards that FOMO demands and you suddenly get still facers to smile at you and throw adoration at you, that's not the real deal, man. That's a kind of sick version of love. And yet it feels so good, right? Because now you're important. Now you have power and influence, and you can tweet something and everybody it sends ripples and, ooh, wow, this is powerful, right? I've made it. And then, oh man, how many sweet little hearts that have already gotten distorted enough to feel like they don't love themselves, right? Because that if you don't love yourself, and that's the violence, that's the abuse. That happens young, guys. the abuse that I'm speaking to, that slow, insidious, between the lines abuse that happens over time and it's normal, and it happens from our parents, and it happens from our siblings, and it happens from our schoolmates and our classes and our teachers and the TV. It's all FOMO driven. So what do you get? You get this sense maybe not even past your single digits, and you're already feeling like you're worthless, unless you can, coerce yourself and muster up enough ambition to play the game and work your way to the top no matter what it takes, even if you have to sell your soul. And when I say sell your soul, I'm saying it's being sold in the sense of you're being cut off from that authenticity and that true you that never wanted to play this game. But we lose touch with it, and slowly we get more and more removed from that until we don't even know that anything's missing. But we're still driven by this FOMO because, you see someone else is making it. And look at music is a great example. And for me, this was a huge one because I'm a musician. And of course, I was a mixed bag here, and I think everybody is. But my music and songs, more so than a lot of the people around me writing music, were very much about calling out this condition, which I learned the hard way, even though I thought I was, of course everybody wants to hear how, I have a song called The Soul, and it's all about how everybody's doing what everybody's doing, and everyone's doing what they know, and what they know is what's been exemplified to them, and everybody's on the FOMO boat, everyone's on the Titanic. And to dare suggest something like that, to call out that good people, bad people alike, all on the same boat, well, that's not a very popular thing to call out. And I started to notice this by the still face response that I was getting again and again, whether it was releasing a song, an album, at a concert, whatever it might have been, a kind of feeling of, I'd share this song and I share this, I feel the wisdom, the source self, if you will, the soul coming through in the music. But even while I was doing that, I was wanting to make it on the Titanic. I was wanting to get fans and popularity, and I wanted to be like John Mayer, and I wanted to, I was setting these standards for myself that it was, to say square peg round hole would be a misnomer, because my music wasn't a peg trying to go into a hole. It was something entirely different. So I'm just sharing this example because when we see in the culture, what happens is somebody brings through some newfangled variant, and you'll notice it with each passing year, and everything has to up the ante, right? Because what happens is we get desensitized. Oh, you need to up the ante, the sex factor, the violence factor, the grittiness of the sounds, the loudness war that they called it. And, there was a noticeable smashing of the waveforms from bottom to top over the decades, and louder, 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 louder. Why? Because you need to catch the attention. Why? Because if you don't catch the attention, you're missing the boat. So you gotta, in other words, FOMO is a slave driver, guys, in every way, shape, and form. And things like that should be sacred, like music, suddenly it gets, not unlike the way nature, we'll just mow down entire forests, wipe out entire species, and even mutilate animals and stuff in that process, unilaterally taking from nature to our own ends. That's a metaphor for taking, like with what's happening with all of our creativity. It's all about extract it, take it, package it for the Titanic, get it on the shelves, and make the money and claw your way to the top, because everybody's got a one up. So it's a one-upping, FOMO-driven, one-upping, desensitizing, narcissistic festival that we're all normalizing to. And so if you get desensitized to that, that's really the crisis, because then you don't know that anything's wrong anymore. So if you can zoom out and see that with me, it's horrific. It's horrifying. It's like, wow, well, if we just keep doing this, what's to stop us from just normalizing all awful things? Yeah, well, that's life. I don't believe that's just the way that it will go. I do think that all humans, as long as you have a beating heart, there's a sense of goodness and a wanting, not wanting pain and suffering. But if we get desensitized to pain and suffering, we start to glorify it and even sexualize it, like in any number of movies. I'm not going to go specifics here, but and the whole pornography industry and the way it's just driven to have to up the ante, up the ante, up the ante, and there's something sacred being lost. And it's when I bring that to my clients or yoga students or whatever, in terms of the sacred, that's why we slow down. In a way, we stop the FOMO train, right? Because the FOMO train, it says go faster, go faster. And what do? We coerce our yoga practices, for example, to speed up to our FOMO lives, when yoga was supposed to originally free us from that suffering, from being under the cracking whip of the slave driver while thinking that it's us doing it. We think that we're choosing, but we're not actually choosing from an authentic place. We're just getting whipped into a game that's so big and so universal that we don't even know it's a game. That we don't even know we have a choice. We can opt out of that game. So when I tell people to slow down, get in touch with the sacred, I'm often met with a, yeah, I'm not really into that. I like to go fast. And of course I see what they're saying. They're admitting and confessing that they need to slow down more than anybody. But when you're addicted to the FOMO lifestyle, you don't want to stop, drop, and roll. Like one of my last podcasts, you don't want to relax. Because relax on the deepest level means you are free from the Titanic. You are off of the Titanic. But you don't want to get off the Titanic if everybody else is on it. Because the FOMO train, the FOMO drive is so strong. And so even though it's a cutesy name, FOMO, fear of missing out, it's no small thing. FOMO is, in my view, at least the way that I'm saying it, it's the ultimate slave driver. And we are the slaves if we don't see it. And we can think that we're choosing what we want, but we didn't even get to choose how we feel. We're choosing what we want. Like, for example, I really want to make it in the music industry or whatever. Since we've been using that theme, that's what I was doing. And as years were passing and I wasn't getting the response that I felt I deserved, I started to get this feeling of I'm missing the boat. And that's when the whole Titanic theme came in, because yes, I am missing the boat. In fact, but which boat? The Titanic. Good. I want to miss that boat. And you do too. But when everybody is in that unit, so the Titanic is a name for that universal driving force. And people have misdiagnosed the problem as money as the root of all evil. Well, that's another symptom, the misuse and abuse of the sacred flow of resources and value in the form of money. Money is not evil. It's our misuse and abuse of that, just like we misuse and abuse everything. Nature, ourselves, our kids, all of it is being normally abused and misused. And then we get desensitized and we see all these problems and we go, what's wrong with the world today? And, it's just a big mess. And we don't, and all because we can't see what's generating it. Oh, right? And get to that deep underlying universal cause for all variants of suffering, normalized and obvious. We don't realize then that we are, to come back to that example, I want to get successful, whatever the form of that. But what's really driving that? This is where stop, drop, roll comes in, because if I don't even have the freedom to stop and go, hold on a second, I feel in this moment like that's what I want. But is it really what I want? Why do I want it? This is when we start to be brave enough to go, oh man, I've lost people from my life they couldn't be around me anymore because I would bring that out. And where am I coming from? I want you to be free from automatic knee-jerk reactions. You think you're making choices, but it's really something deeper choosing for you, because you didn't have the wherewithal to say, pause, I'm putting into question everything that I think I want. That's badass, guys. And that's the beginning of getting into the zone, because you can't get into the zone if you're under the whip, under the crack of the invisible whip. That's unzonish, right? And all you can hope for in that is little breaks. And when you have a zone moment, you're like, wow. And, John Mayer, all props to you. But when you sang the song Clarity and you said, I love that song. But when you sing that, this moment of clarity, I'm going to just paraphrase the theme of it, this zone moment. You're having a zone moment of clarity where the rock candy is melted and diamonds remain, and then, you're in that bliss space, and then you're going to wait to see if it lasts forever. Well, that's passive. And then, of course, you say, and it won't because it can't, and it's not supposed to. Well, that, of course, is the conclusion, because that's what we always experience. The zone moments are just you're not supposed to expect that to last. And that's where I challenge you. Not because I want to challenge you, but because I want people to realize it is supposed to last. And it's not that it lasts by itself. It lasts by participation and conscious honing and hanging in that space and understanding what the interrupter is. Because if you don't understand what's interrupting the zone, you can't interrupt the interrupter. So this is huge, guys. What I'm saying is that we are lives. We think we're free to choose, but if you really look at it, we don't have an actual real choice, because we're in that FOMO knee jerk. It's a fight or flight state. FOMO is a fight or flight state because missing out is not strong enough of, if you say missing out, the feeling and the fear is way deeper than the words would suggest or seem to justify, because missing out means you are missing out on what? The bliss, in whatever way, shape, or form it takes. I don't want to miss this concert because everyone else is going to be going, and I don't want to be the one that didn't get to see, this concert and be part of this thing, or whatever it might be. So you're going to do whatever you can to make sure you don't miss out. So that's the fear of missing out. Well, that's the universal thing here. And what that does, just almost in the sheer physics of it, is that the more hungry you are, and the more you consume, the hungrier you get. Rolling Stones, I can't get no satisfaction. Right? I try and I try and I try and I try. I can't get no. That is a confession of the insatiability of the FOMO life. It only gives you the illusion that if you are to give it everything you got, you will be happy, once you're, sitting on the toilet and raking in the cash because you've made, a famous song and you're getting mailbox money for it, right? And then you're happy and you've made it. So this is the way, those thoughts happen really, really quick, and we can decide and even commit ourselves to a lifestyle that we don't realize is robbing us from our real bliss, with the promise of bliss that never comes. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from when I challenge you on what you think you want, because I think that you might be thrilled to discover that it was here. And it was here all along, and you didn't actually need that go-between, whatever form or shape it's taken. Wouldn't you like to feel that? Wouldn't you like to be free? But then you have to face, there's that part of you that's like, but I don't want to let go of what I want. And that's what I come across so often in myself and in others as I challenge it. One has to admit that there is an addictive quality to the lifestyle of FOMO itself. You become addicted, almost dependent on that stress. It's like, you can get addicted to coffee or nicotine or whatever and the stimulants. Like, in a way, the ultimate stimulant is that fight or flight FOMO drive. And it simultaneously is killing us while it's promising us the world. And if you frame the whole of society globally in that light, and you realize, oh my God, and you can see the titanic effects, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that humanity is going deeper and deeper into crisis, and in so many ways. And we're like, what's going on? And we so badly want to solve the problem. And that's a good drive. We don't want to lose that. But we always go to the symptom level. So we start to go to the symptoms of FOMO. We start to go to seeing, like, for example, the greed of if you want to call it the 1% or whatever, the greed of those in power who are, subjugating the lessers to fill their pockets more when they don't actually need it. Just this raw greed of some of the more rich people on the planet. Just that raw self-servingness. If you can see that that's all part of the disease, rather than going, you're the problem. You're the problem. It's the Illuminati, man. All that stuff. Fine, have at it. But where is it getting you? Right? So you may not want to let go of that either. You may not want to let go of the bad guy. We love the scapegoat. Everybody loves a good scapegoat. So you can say, you're the problem. Phew. I don't have to face the responsibility of real choice, because real choice is scary. Scary AF. And that's where the bliss lives. So when we're used to that constricted state, we almost get comfy and cozy in our FOMO lives. And so by the time, I come along, or any, authentic wisdom teaching is going to challenge that at the very ground floor, you have to be willing to face that you don't want to relax and you don't want bliss, actually. Bliss is too scary, because bliss requires you to look at yourself. And in that reversal of the restricting, asphyxiating effects on your soul, in the reversal of that, in a way, you gotta feel a lot of intense feelings and sensations. And we have so many defense mechanisms in place for that. And we have so many people to if you're in that mindset of, if everyone else is doing it, then it must be good. If that's your logic, which is really weak, everyone else is doing it, so it must be healthy. That's the basic logic. And you realize everyone's in the game of cover up. Everyone, is hiding what's really going on to a large extent, and having to put forth, I've got it all together, I'm good, I'm having da-da-da-da. And some people can't hold it up that well, and then you get called depressed, even though everyone's depressed, but this one can't hide it or cover it up anymore, medicate it, boom. Don't get to the real source of the depression. Is you basically cut off from your life source and being. You got cut off from your being, and you got cozy here, and people don't know how to navigate back because they don't know what's causing it. So then you might be here, right? And I'm just using these fingers by my head to show that you're under that restriction, and this is what's plaguing you. This is the depression, right? So you're under that, but you can't see it because it's so deep. And so now what are you going to do? I don't like feeling this way. How do I get better? So this is when you think, oh, well, this is good. This is a good move. Well, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to go to, I'm going to start going to yoga. I'm going to, this spiritual practice and these self-help books, they're really making me feel inspired. Be here now. That's really inspiring to me because I hadn't really thought about that. I'm going to practice that. And then you can take your boxed lens into any one of those realms. And what the wisdom marketers are doing is packaging wisdom for that, to cater to that. So that's what's so gross about it, is packaging wisdom, which is supposed to free people from this restriction. And you're packaging it for us to stay in that space with the illusion, riding on the adrenaline, if you will, of I didn't feel this before and now I do. I feel I wasn't flexible and I took yoga and now I'm flexible, or I wasn't spiritual and now I've got this idea of spirit and angels and this, and it gives you a buzz, it gives you a lift, it's exciting, it gives you hope. There's a glimmer of hope in it, and there's a marketing of hope, right? But it's not getting us off the Titanic. You can market the hope of getting off the Titanic and people will buy it up. And that's what's going on, guys. That's what's happening right now. That's serious That's a crisis, because these words are getting completely bastardized by people who haven't done their homework. Wisdom, yoga, liberation, moksha, all these names that are just getting, again, packaged because what the people are demanding is, and this is the narcissism, this is a great segue into the next one, but we want things to be packaged and to cater to our state of what is really a deep handicap, a normalized handicap of not being able to zone anymore, which means you're not able to bliss anymore, which means you're not happy, which means you are in a kind of hell. I would go so far as to say that that's what hell is you are cut off from joy. You're cut off from life. You're cut off from yourself, And FOMO is just one big invisible institution that's got us all, under its command, and it doesn't want us to see it. And I'm here to shine the light on the FOMO and the Titanic, and to help you see and help you to pull that lens off, and to go, oh my God, and to really tap deeper sense and deeper sanity and deeper bliss, sustainable bliss. That's sustainability. If we are trying to create sustainability in our technologies and in our world and in our societies in an unsustainable mind space, which means being, an unsustainable way of being, then it's a losing battle. We can only feign the feeling of progress for so long before there's going to be a chain reaction and downfall. To each step forward, there's a step back, because we're not getting to the real solution. So sustainability, the end of the violence, the proper parenting and nurturing of human beings to not get messed up in the first place, all of it, it all comes together. The end of these ideological clashes, all of it. Imagine everybody starting to zoom out enough to see the FOMO condition and to go, oh my God, what have we been doing? And that all the finger pointing wasn't getting us anywhere. It's so tempting to go, you're the bad ones. And this video that just came out yesterday, that was a viral video. It was a couple days ago, actually. A viral video of this young boy standing in a seemingly confrontational and almost mocking way of a Native American guy beating his drum and singing his prayer. And of course, the way that you saw that video was like, oh my God, like it just makes your blood boil. You feel like there's this arrogant kid who is just, basically desecrating this guy who's just trying to hold the space for his prayer and for spirit and for his tradition and all of that. It was a very upsetting moment, right, to see that. And then the next day, another video came out showing a more complete story, and you realized that there was these African-American Hebrew Israelites, I think is the name, and they were shouting such profanities. It was unbelievable, and of course totally justified. And then you realize, oh my gosh, and so everyone's pointing the fingers at them, and they're pointing the fingers at the other guys, and then these guys are trying to, the guy playing his drums is trying to quell the suffering or the possibility of violence, and that's also where the boy said he was coming from too. And then yet they were colliding, and it seemed like the confrontation, and it was being experienced as such, and you start to go, wait, where's the bad guy here? And it was like, oh, it was the Israelites that started it, right? And that's again stopping at the symptomatic level. You stop and you realize, no, look, this is something that we're all in, even if it's just the ignorance, right? It's the ignorance that breeds such situations. Even if you're a quote unquote good guy and you're not saying any mean or awful things, you still may be contributing to the extent that you don't know what's going on, right? And so you want to stand up to it in the name of goodness, but you're standing up to it with your myopic lens still firmly fixed, and you're trying to do good, but you're exacerbating the situation even more. And this is how things escalate into, riots and war and death and murder and all of that. because it's a collision of within the ideological space, which is what the Titanic is made of. It's the kingdom of ideology, no matter what ideology it is, and the ideology in that myopic sense is the splitter. It's what creates the threat between differing ideologies, and that leads to the hate, right? So if you can see, the source of hate is in that splitter, that lens that we're all using, even if you're a quote unquote good guy. So this is huge. This means he calls all of us into equal responsibility, not in the same sense. It's like there are different variations of illness. If you frame it in terms of not good versus bad, but just well versus unwell, there are those who are way more unwell, and they have to answer to that. And that has to be met appropriately. We don't want to have one size fits all response to this, but we all need to get woke if we actually want to overcome the violence that we're seeing. To me, that video is just a preview of what's happening all the time and in different ways, and it's going to happen more and more and more, and it's going to escalate, and we're going to get more and more used to it. And the more used to it we get, the more we're going to start to cross that boundary of violence. And then the more that happens, the more we get used to that. That's the danger we're facing. It's a kind of, if you think of what I'm calling out here, the Titanic FOMO code is a virus, and it's coding us to have a self-destruct, right? If you think of the whole of humanity as one being, one body, it's in self-destruct mode. Because we've got all of the diversity, that's the pluribus, e pluribus unum, which means in many one, and that's the founding, overarching spirit of 1776, and which is not just about America, but it's about democracy. It's about being able to have a space. One nation under God is a language you may not resonate with because of the word God or whatever, but if you can, again, decode it, take away the religious connotations of it, and just see the one nation under oneness, under unum, under reason, under source, and kind of change it and see it in that way. There is a common ground, we have to go higher, and we have to go deeper to find that common ground, and we have to let go of something deep. And people aren't wanting to let go of their ideologies because that's their identity, and that's what we know. So we're all under the sway of this, and we all have to human up, in the sense that we all have to be able to be brave and zoom out and face ourselves in that sense. And there's a deep vulnerability in that. There's a deep uncomfortability in that. There are detox, withdrawal emotions, reactions. We're going to have to go through the shakes and the chills and the fevers and throwing up and but imagine us doing that in a woke way, in a conscious way, because there is no getting around that part. But I believe we can go into it now in a gracious way, as opposed to having to get worse before they get better, which is often, the thing I hear out there in the zeitgeist. Say, it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. Well, maybe. But I would venture to say I'd like to be a voice now in the picture that says, no, it's worse already. It's already worse. Let's get better. It's not a matter of it having to get worse, because it could just get worse and worse and worse and worse, and we can take ourselves out. That's a reality. So we have to see that it is already worse, but we have to sensitize to that worseness. And if everyone, the FOMO, Titanic, is all in collusion in terms of covering up the real illness, and in the pretending that everything, I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine, and we're all putting on that veneer, that facade, and then when someone comes along to say, hey, enough of the facading, let's get real, let's not string them up, let's not kill that person, or those people, and we need to really go, okay guys, we're all in this together. How are we going to get off this Titanic together? Things are already worse. We're in that moment now. It doesn't have to get worse. So that is my call to you today. The NOMO FOMO principle is FOMO is hell. And it is a choice. You don't have to be under the sway of the FOMO life anymore, but you do have to see it, and you do have to be willing to let go of all of that deeply, that addiction, really, to that life, and that can feel like the end in a very scary way. But I am here to say that's the beginning. That's the beginning of sustainable bliss life, which is what humans are meant to be, in a harmonious, woke, I thou dialogical flow, just like nature. Humans have come from nature, disconnected from that sacred flow, that deeper reason that governs all. We've alienated and removed ourselves from that flow in a kind of almost unconscious and deep-seated power trip over reality. That's the beginning of narcissism. And we need to rise now. And this is not about punishing ourselves anymore. We've already been punished so much just by being cut off from that bliss, from that natural flow, that deeper Zen state that is not reserved for the select few who are willing to give up all their possessions and go to be a monk somewhere. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want to take away this idea of actual genuine enlightenment is this word that kind of gives it a sense of this far off woo-woo sounding thing, right? When what I'm saying is, not only is it not that, it is our duty to bliss. It is, because if we're not blissing, something's terribly wrong, and there's going to be all kinds of fallout from that, just even from one person, let alone the whole of humanity. And our kids, man, think about our kids. The kids are just they're just coming in, and we're just passing it on to them, So this is serious. If it's not enough to just think of the precious being that you are, which it should be, because you are still that sweet infant child in the sense of the purity of your heart, even if it's covered up with a lot of scars and wounds and protections and all of that, you're still that sweet being, and that is good enough reason to get what I'm saying. But if it's not right now, think of the kids. Think about how they're just getting thrust, those sweet, innocent beings are getting thrust into this machine. And even with the greatest intentions as parents, we want to do the right thing. We might be laboring under the sway of FOMO, which is a deep stress and a deep fear. And in that sense, while trying to be good parents, you can be infusing your children with the same virus. And that is something that if we don't get woke to that, we're on our way out. At this point, the self-destruct is going to be, in a sense, irreversible. So my invitation to you is urgent, and yet it's precisely about opting out of the stress life. Isn't that funny? It's extremely urgent and pressing to take the pressure off. It's a deeper kind of pressure, right? It's a good kind of pressure. It's a pressure that's calling us all to rise to a higher expression, a higher way of being, not just expression, because we don't want to fake the human up. It has to be an authentic shedding and letting go and healing if we're going to really do this. It's no longer about our egos and making ourselves believe we're doing it when we're not actually doing it, all of that. So no more FOMO, guys. Woohoo! And let's get excuse me. Let's get so emotional. Let's get off the Titanic ASAP. Let's see it. To see it is to get off of it in that sense. When we're pretending like it's not there and everything's normal, that's how we keep ourselves in the serious crisis space, because the crisis isn't all of the symptoms we're seeing. The crisis is that we don't know what's generating the crisis, and all of them, and that's a serious crisis. So this is exciting, man, this time that we're in. So I hope you can be excited about it and help this awareness, hone this awareness, because we need everyone getting activated, everyone getting woke together, in order to make this crossing. So, and it's all of us, guys. This is all of us. We're all in it together. So let's do it. I'll see you next time when we dive deep into this theme of universal narcissism. So I'll see you then.